Today I'd like to speak about the negativity bias. You may have heard of it. It seems that we are primed to remember bad things and to forget good ones. This makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary point of view. Imagine that you're a hunter-gatherer. You pick a berry from a bush. It tastes a little bit bitter. It might be poisonous. It was really important for our survival that we should remember where that bush was and never eat from it again. You can see it in mammals, in other mammals. For instance, your cat, maybe you're trying to put the cat in the basket to take it to the vet and it's going, meow, don't want to go there. Or you might see a dog bark aggressively at somebody or shy away from somebody who's carrying a stick. Now that person may just be carrying a stick because they needed to help them walk. But maybe for the dog, he's remembering a time when he was beaten with a stick. Or you may see a horse running around a field and someone's shying away from a particular part. Now that may very well be because they heard a loud noise, a loud bang that frightened them at that time. On a more ordinary day-to-day level, we see it in ourselves a lot. For instance, you've had a really good day and on the way home, somebody is a bit rude to you, a little bit aggressive. And when you get back, what is the one thing that you will remember about the day? Probably isn't the flowers that you saw or whatever. It will be, oh, that person. Or if you're living with someone, they'll say, oh, how was your day? You'll say, we won't believe what happened today. That person was so rude to me. So really the negative takes a very strong prominence in our mind and in our feelings. Dr. Rick Hanson, whom I have a real crush on, you should really check him out on YouTube. He's wonderful. He talks very simply and very kindly about quite complicated things. Anyway, he calls this phenomenon Velcro for bad and Teflon for good. So Velcro really, that bad things stick to us and good things sort of slip off like water off a duck's back. Now this is quite important because of course when we do remember bad things, it has a very strong protective factor. It may be really something that's important to think about. Why am I frightened of this? Or why am I remembering this? But of course it also has a downside, which is that the good things that happen to us don't somehow refuel us quite as much as they could do. You may have heard the sentence, cells that fire together, wire together. So that's really talking about the synaptic connections in the brain. The more you think about something, the more you do something, the stronger that connection becomes, the more hardwired it becomes in the brain. You could think of the image, for instance, of a lawn, a very plain lawn, and if you walk down it the same way every time, you will create a kind of little path. Or in the snow, you can see, pure, clean snow, and in you walk, and then more and more and more, that particular bit gets stronger. Or a little stream, it finds a way down the rocks, and then if the next lot of water finds a way down the rocks, and then it becomes almost like a little rivulet. So really, this is the idea that the more we do something, the more hardwired it becomes. Now, this is important because we can actually pay attention to what or we can choose what we pay attention to. And a lot of the mindfulness practices are in order to train our attention, to bring ourselves back to something that we wish to pay attention to. If we are Teflon for good, it really means that we have to work quite hard. It's not our default to hold on to it. We have to work quite hard to reinforce those connections. So in a very simple manner, you could almost say that all it takes is to really imbue yourself, embed good experiences. So if something is happening that is wonderful, or that feels good, it could be something as simple as having a light breeze on your face, or the sunlight on your back while you're working, or coming across a beautiful bush. The idea is just to take it in, stop. Feel the feeling if it's the sun on your back. Really absorb it. Allow your skin to feel warm and the glow to sort of go inside your body. Or if you see a beautiful flower, take time. You do 30 seconds. 30 seconds is enough. Just take time to look at it. Look at it closely. Maybe smell it. Maybe even very gently touch it so that you don't harm it, obviously, but really allow all your senses to take this experience in and to embed it. Because, in a way, the more of those good experiences you store inside yourself, the more resources, the more internal resources you have to draw upon in hard and difficult times. So, for instance, at the moment with the pandemic, we could really sink into a sort of quicksand of misery and depression and anxiety. And of course, here again, it's really important to know the reality. The reality is that there is a very strong virus that we need to be protected from, to protect ourselves from. And we know that the best way to do that at the moment is to stay at home, if that's at all possible. I know in some countries at the moment it's heartbreaking and people don't even have homes to go to. But in as much as we can make sure that we take the external action that is important and relevant. But at the same time, how can we stop ourselves from being completely sucked in by the worry, the anxiety, the misery of it all? One of the things we can do, of course, is that it is springtime at the moment. And spring doesn't seem to know that it's COVID-19. And it is, the flowers are blossoming, the trees are beautiful, bird song is around. So these are things that we can take refuge in, that we can take comfort from. And it's really important that we do this to counterbalance our sort of negativity bias. So that's why, and luckily, we are allowed to go out once a day for a little bit of exercise, but it doesn't have to be outside. It can be savoring something that you're eating. It could be as simple as, as a fruit, a lush orange, which is just oozing with delicious sweet juice. Or at the moment, it hopefully would be mango season in India. You could really absorb the taste, the color, the flavor, the smell, the fragrance of certain fruits. So it's really, what can we do ourselves to renew our sense of well-being, of goodness, and how can we make sure that we embed it so that it doesn't get washed away just because we tend not to remember things that are good. So I would highly recommend, that every day you find at least one thing that brings you pleasure, that brings you joy, and give yourself the time to savor it, to absorb it, and to help you build your resilience in a time which is very difficult for all. So I thank you for listening to me and look forward to seeing you soon. Be well and stay safe.